Welcome back to the Security Champion podcast. My name is Michael Birch. I'm your host, and today I have a very special guest. Actually been with us before on the podcast, Dustin Lehr. And this one is a little bit different because last time we went into what was your background, what's your security journey. That's how I usually talk to most of our guests. But we actually have an announcement to make for this podcast. And the announcement is Dustin has joined the Security Journey team. He's going to be working as the Director of Application Security Advocacy. As part of that, also will be going forward, not only recording podcasts with me on this podcast, but will be helping me host this podcast and bringing in guests and interviewing them as part of the process. So to kick that off, I'm going to hand it over to you, Dustin, and talk about this kind of new situation, this new role, what brought you to Security Journey.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm super excited to record this episode, by the way, Mike, and to work with you and to work with Security Journey. I've been kind of hovering around Security Journey more or less over the years, even purchased Security Journey in a past role. So it's so amazing to work for a company that I've actually purchased, like looking at all the options out there, doing all the evaluations, et cetera, choosing a product and saying, cool, and then seeing it work. And then getting a chance to work for that company is amazing. So really happy to be here. I'm happy to be in this advocacy role. My journey, which, you mentioned, we already sort of covered my background, all that stuff. I was a software engineer. I was an AppSec person. I think for me, the move from practitioner to vendor is kind of the big jump here. I did this a little bit just with running my own business, Catalyst, but at this point, I'm pretty well into helping vendors, just like Security Journey, kind of get the word out in terms of the stuff that they're doing. And I think the reason that attracts me so much right now is because it's a chance to reach more people. It's a chance to help more people. It sort of goes beyond, hey, I'm going to work for a single company. I'm going to bring my expertise there. I'm going to help them with their strategy work, all of that stuff, into an opportunity to help many companies with their strategy and so forth. So to me, that's really what this advocacy role is all about and what excites me about it. So I'm sure we'll go into more detail, but that's probably a good primer for the conversation.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest things I like to call out here, and this is something I don't think you usually see in the roles that we have around AppSec, is something that's just specifically advocacy, right? To be an advocate for secure coding, for application security, for secure practices. So I guess the first question about that is what drives, I kind of get the idea what drives you to advocacy. What's advocacy really mean to you here? What are you looking like? What does that mean for you that you're going to be accomplishing in this role?
Yeah, I mean, this is about leadership at its core. Like, I think it comes down to, again, going beyond just leading an AppSec effort at a single company and moving a lot more into leading an effort across the market, across the industry, and helping, get the word out and being a thought leader and bringing all of the things that I've learned by being a practitioner out into the world and helping as many people as possible, like I was mentioning before, but also getting feedback from folks too. Like, I see it as a very amazing opportunity, unique opportunity to, learn from others as well. Like, have these great conversations where it's this two-way thing. Hey, here's what I've learned running an AppSec program. What are you seeing? And then it's a chance to sort of collect that data across the industry to a large degree. And then not only feed that back to Security Journey to make sure we're doing better, for our customers, or we're doing the right things for our customers, but also helping other customers and prospects understand the stuff that we're learning by collecting all of that data. So that's how I see the role, sort of at its core, and around sort of the mission of the role itself. And I'm super excited about that. I'm super excited to learn from others, but also just share my own experience. I mean, AppSec is hard. There's so many challenges. I've run into so many walls and roadblocks and, leaders who just didn't understand and having to overcome those challenges. And trying to reach developers who are really busy, and how do we get them on board with what we're trying to do, and how do we get them to be more knowledgeable, but also maybe a little more excited about security in general, so that they can jump in as champions and sort of do a great job influencing the rest of the organization to follow best practices and habits and all of that. So the whole space is just so fascinating to me. Like, I really felt like I found my place in the world, or at least in my career, when I found AppSec. Again, I was a software engineer. I really enjoyed kind of being heads down and writing code and building things. I very much have an engineering mindset in general, but combining that technical side with the influence side, and I really think that's what AppSec is all about. I say this a lot. I'm going to say it, and maybe we could debate this or whatnot. But I do think you should lean into the sales side as an AppSec person. I think when you become an AppSec person, you more or less become more of a salesperson, because you have to sell security to your organization. So all these concepts of like how to sell things, how to influence mindsets and change culture comes into play. So anyway, it's a very fascinating space, and I'm excited to continue this journey with Security Journey.
It's one of the things that you called out is the learning from everybody else. That is by far my favorite part of this podcast, right? Doing the podcast part, right? This is one of my, it's not the main job I do at Security Journey, right? This is one of those things that we just do additionally because we think it has value, and I do it because I think it's fun, and I actually really enjoy having these conversations. But one of the biggest things I do here is I've tricked my audience into thinking that I have no knowledge. I just get to a bunch of other really smart people to come in here and teach me, and I let you all learn while I go about it, right? So I'm basically getting this free education from all the experts in these fields. It's the best part of this job, right? It's people pay top dollar to get the type of educations we're able to get here by just collaborating and having fun conversations. By far one of my favorite parts of the job, being able to do that knowledge share and grow from that, right? I think that's part of that, and something else I wanted to pull on too. And I'm gonna bring Dan into this, our CEO Dan, because it's one of the things you talked about is changing that perspective. And I like being technical, right? I have some software engineering background in myself too, and I sometimes get pulled away to where I'll want to do something. So I'll start getting my head in the code, and I'll start working on a project as like an individual contributor is kind of the word almost. And then my CEO always has to like reel me back in. He's like, hey, remember, you're here to lead. You're not here to be in the code. You're not here to do the task. Get your head out of the code. Your value is you need to be leading. You need to be having conversations. You need to be driving change. You should not be doing these individual tasks. Now, it's hard for me because I feel like I'm an engineer at heart, and I really just want. Sometimes I just want to put my head in that notebook and just code for the weekend throughout until I finish the thing, right? Because it's self-gratifying. It feels really good when you finish a project. I finally got the UI to display that information I really wanted it to do, and it's showing the data in the right way. Like, that's such a gratifying feeling. But as leaders, right, and the space that we're in, it's combating that desire to do that type of work and focusing where the effort, I think, really does matter. And that's kind of the Dan's call out and reminder to me quite often is, hey, focus where your value is, right? That's where you need to be at.
That is so true. I mean, this is hitting the nail on the head for me because I've thought about this a lot. And I remember the decision to go from engineer. I was actually an app architect at the time. And I was transitioning into a security architect role. And then very shortly after that, I got the opportunity to lead AppSec. This was back at Staples. And I had to think about it for like weeks, literally weeks, because I knew that it was stepping away to a large degree from the type of work that I really enjoyed, and that's making stuff work. Just like you said, it's so satisfying to spend hours on something and then see it work in the way that you wanted it to work, and then there's some tweaks you can make, and it's sort of this endless cycle of dopamine hits, more or less. Like, I worked hard at it, I got the reward. I worked hard again, I got the reward. But I loved that. And I knew that I would not be able, and I shouldn't, frankly, to your point, be doing that as much as a leader, if at all. So I had to really think about it. And ultimately, it came down to what you were talking about. And that's, I believe that I can personally provide a different type of value as a leader. I don't want to downplay the importance of what developers do at all. It's very important. Trust me, I did it for 13 years. I loved it. I was valuable doing it. Okay. But my unique capabilities started to shift into the realm of leadership. And I had to make that decision to say, how can I best contribute to my team and to the company? Is it writing code? Is it doing some of these other things that maybe enable other people to write code? Like, I really saw it as like, hey, the servant leadership concept where you're saying, I will do some of the stuff that maybe other people don't want to do or find annoying or whatever. Okay, I will do that. And I will do that to empower my team. Okay, right? So that was the decision, is I'm going to do this stuff to do that. But also it fit me and my personality, my wants, my desires in terms of what I wanted to be doing. And that's not just heads down writing code, but also being out there and influencing folks. And this AppSec role at Staples many years ago now was all about that. It was bringing this new concept of secure by design and AppSec. And at the time, it was the trend toward, sort of away from like this ivory tower approach, like we're the security team, we just tell people what to do, into we want to partner with engineers and the rest of the org. And I got to carry that message to VPs and leadership and C-levels and so forth. And it was just amazing. And so that was the transition for me. And I completely hear you. It's totally different, but we need to play our strengths and we need to step into where we're providing the most value that we can individually.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, like I think you call that out perfectly when, and I think part of that desire, right, that feeling and that gratification with an engineering product, I can see results pretty quick. I do work, there's a result, like with a very, very short amount of time. With what we do, that's not the case. Right? You don't set up an AppSec program and all of a sudden tomorrow I'm seeing all the results. You don't start a champion program and all of a sudden it's running and you're seeing all these effects. It's things that take months, or it can take years, like to really build out a good program and have the changes you're looking to have, so that sometimes it feels kind of like a thankless job, right? Like it's and rightfully so. I get it. Don't pat my back yet because I did a bunch of work, because you don't see the results yet. So you gotta wait. I have to keep grinding at it. We have to keep working at it until I can finally get those results that I can show you. But it takes time. So it's hard sometimes to cling on to that when you're like, man, I can just do this one little thing and I can see the results real quick and it feels so good. Learn to let that go a little bit and be like, okay, we got to play the long-term game. These things take time to have impact. It's important.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to show wins along the way too. Like, this is something I had to learn pretty quick, is that this stuff takes time, a lot of time, to really integrate best practices into the teams and all that. But to show that you're making progress, like the perception of security has changed, is something you can show pretty quickly in a role like this. The new AppSec leader, I remember this at Staples and Fivetran too, frankly. The new AppSec leader is here. Oh, this is a little different. You know what I mean? Okay, this might be a little different than we're used to. The security team is friendlier somehow, right? And you can show that. You can show that, hey, I'm building relationships and I have a little bit better perception, across the organization of what we're doing. And then that's momentum that you can build on, right? Now that you have that positive reputation, more or less, how are you going to use that to show progress over time? And that's extremely important. And I think it comes down to listening. Like, I'm going to go back to that theme because it's a good theme for this podcast as well. Hey, we're going to listen. We want to learn from people. We're not here to just tell everyone, what to do based on our experience, because it could be wrong, or there could be other more effective ways to go about this stuff. And I think as part of this podcast, would love to invite guests and just learn about different approaches. I'm not going to sit here and say I have all the answers. There are plenty of gaps and holes in what I know that I will freely admit, and would just love to learn from our guests on this podcast. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. I can't wait to see what we get to do with this. All right, this is a great, I think, break moment. We always do a quick 30-second word from our sponsors. So we're going to let them run that sponsorship real quick, and then we'll come back and we'll dive into some more conversations. We're going to talk about champions. We're going to talk about AppSec. We're going to talk about strategy and kind of whatever else comes top to mind.
Awareness programs don't provide enough in-depth learning. Ensure your technical teams are getting the knowledge they need to build safer software. Security Journey provides hands-on secure coding training in an application sandbox that allows developers to identify, break, and fix common security vulnerabilities. Give your developers the opportunity to recognize and prevent common and emerging security issues before they become a problem. Visit securityjourney.com to try our training today.
All right, welcome back to the Security Champion podcast. I'm here with Dustin Lehr, and we're going to be talking about Security Champion programs, motivation, developer behavior, kind of anything that comes top of mind that we think is relevant and important for people to understand. And to start this conversation, I actually have a story I want to talk about. I've been doing a lot of talks really recently, and one of the talks that I give is called Code to Culture. And as part of my primer to get people kind of in the idea of what motivation is and how it works, I give a little bit of story about self-determination theory and some of the people that wrote the book on it back in the day. Now, as a quick intro to this, we're going to be talking about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is things that are basically derived for yourself. You're self-motivated to do something based on your inner drives, versus extrinsic motivation is things like reward systems. Do I get a badge? Do I get money? Like, do I get a vacation time? Whatever thing that we can throw at somebody and say, hey, do this for us, we'll give you a reward for it, right? So it's the difference between inner and outer. So for this, back in the day, there were a couple psychologists, and there was Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, and they did an experiment with something called a Soma cube puzzle. What a Soma cube puzzle is, it's these pieces of a cube that have all taken apart. They have different type of shapes, and you have to put them back together to make the cube. That's all you have to do, right? And what they did for their experiment is they had a group come in, and they paid them. And they're like, okay, you guys have an hour, see how many times you can solve these. We'll pay you for your time depending on how you perform, right? So they got paid to solve the puzzle, right? That was the reward for solving the puzzle. They win, everyone was super motivated, everyone knocked it out. It was a great experience. Then they bring in a second group. There's no money involved this time. They made it a game. They're just like, hey, go in, compete, see who can do it the best, right? They had the people go in, and they were engaged. They were competing. They were trying to beat each other. Super engaged with that, right? And then there was a third trial. And in the third trial, they put both groups back together, and they put a bunch of Soma cubes on the table. No instruction, just left. And everybody kind of went over and started playing with it. But the people who were paid the first time quickly started dwindling away. And they started going off, and they started reading magazines or doing other things that were in the room. But the people that competed the first time, that were just doing it and weren't paid to do so, stayed, and they kept doing it, and they kept that competitiveness. And some of the things they inferred from this is, if you're able to build up that intrinsic motivation, that self-motivation to want to perform, you can get someone to do something with extrinsic motivation. But if you can't tap into that intrinsic motivation, it's going to be short-lived. You have to build the want and desire for someone to continue to want to do that. So they wrote a book about an intrinsic motivation and self-determination theory. It's one of the big things that I really champion when I talk to a lot of people about how to get developers to change behavior, is talking about giving them the ability to have three main things: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And we can kind of dive into those. But Dustin, first thing, right off the bat, hearing that story, like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that is awesome. And that aligns with a lot of things that I talk about. The way that I typically think about motivation is that the intrinsic motivation that you're talking about, the desire to do it for the sake of doing it because you actually care about it, versus caring about something on the outside, some sort of reward or something that you might get out of it. That would be extrinsic motivation. The way I always think about it is to maybe start with extrinsic to sort of get people in the door, more or less, but then show them. I mean, what was interesting about this puzzle is it's intrinsically challenging. There are intrinsic traits about the puzzle itself and the teamwork aspect of working with other people and so forth that go beyond just, hey, maybe you get a piece of pizza if you solve it, or something. That's sort of more of this extrinsic thing. However, to get people into that intrinsic mindset, I think takes time. And sometimes you have to start with extrinsic motivation. Hey, if you do show up, there is something in it for you. Maybe you don't know what security is all about. And let me just share what I'm thinking about. Maybe it's like a training or some sort of a webinar or something. Maybe you meet every month and you talk about, this is a pretty common model with like security champions, right? Like you meet every month, you talk about some sort of security related topic to hopefully help people learn and so forth. Maybe to get people to start showing up, you need the pizza, right? Hey, come get some free food, whatever. But then you deliver, you bring the goods, you actually during the talk, you share things that are relevant to them, that are interesting to them, that pique their curiosity, and they go, oh, I didn't know that. And they start to get interested more intrinsically, so that maybe next time they show up, they don't care about the pizza anymore. They start to care about the topic, for the topic's sake. And I think that's the ultimate goal. So anyway, it very much aligns with the type of approach that I like to take, but please continue.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I think that also like pulls in is when we a transition phase, right? I think for us, that's a really important thing, is getting people in the door can be really hard sometimes to be part of these programs. Now, I deal with a lot of different customer bases when we go in and we talk about, hey, how are you doing your training programs, or how are you running champion programs, or what are you doing in your organization? And a lot of organizations are like, man, I can't get anybody to do it, so we're just gonna make it mandatory. Everybody has to do this, and they're all gonna do the same thing. And I cringe, I cringe a bit, right? Because you do need to motivate, right? I actually do believe that having mandatory training is important, right? Because that at least helps set there's certain goals that have to be met. You have to meet those minimal goals, right? But then there's the reason I think self-determinism is so important, and it comes into some part of that book they wrote about intrinsic motivation, is what self-determinism in this aspect means is that I feel that I have control over the situation and decision, right? That I can help determine some of my pathways. Actually, gamification does this really well, right? When you think about big worlds where you may have a bunch of quests, but there's some games that are a bit linear. You have to do one thing after another. You can't deviate. But some of the very popular games are, well, you have all this stuff you have to do, but I don't care how you do it. Go in whatever you want. You have your own experience every time you do it, right? You feel like you're in control of the situation. It makes it more fun. I have more buy-in, right? Because I get to choose what I do next, right? So I'm much more likely to complete it. We actually do this in training. When we work with a lot of our customers, I'll build up training plans and be like, look, what's the 2 or 3 things you have to train on this year? They're like, these are the 3 things we have to hit. I'm like, great. Put that in every single pathway. Now let's build a bunch of pathways that have different options. So maybe this one does AI specialty. Maybe this one is API specialty. Maybe this one over here is going to be dealing with mobile. But I've had the mandatory trainings in all of them. But then just let them pick. Let them pick. It doesn't matter. You don't care. They're growing security knowledge, and they're going to be way more likely to finish it. They're going to be way more bought in to the topic they chose. And you know what? If they want to switch, cool. Let them switch halfway. Maybe they're like, I actually didn't really want to finish this one. Switch over to the other one. Why is that important? What, to just go do extra training? That's so horrible? Let them switch. Let them do extra training to get to the end goal. That's great for the company. And once again, they feel like they're in control of the situation. Nobody wants to sit there and be like, you just have to do this, because then you lose the ability. Well, that doesn't really apply to me, right? Like I don't do that. At least if I get to choose, I chose something I know applies to me that I care about. So I'm going to finish it.
This is completely spot on. Yeah, my favorite framework is officially a gamification framework called Octalysis. And what I love about it is it goes way beyond just sort of the surface level gamification that you might be thinking. I think people think, okay, gamification, cool, we're just going to turn something into a game. No, there is so much more depth behind that. It's actually not necessarily turning something into a game. It's just taking techniques that games have found to be successful and incorporating them into actually non-game situations. But the whole premise behind Octalis is it's based on core drives of humans. So what motivates people? And there are 8 core drives. I talk about this a lot in my talks. But 2 of them are exactly, and I sort of interpret the world now in terms of Octalysis and what actually motivates people. I've actually gone so far as to profile my own children in terms of what motivates them uniquely. But you're touching on 2 of them. One of them is creativity, being able to put your own input into determining your own training path, et cetera, I think is something that's motivating for people. I think in general, being creative is motivating for folks. You get the choice of doing it the way that you want to do it. But the other motivation here is ownership. And that's that, hey, I built this or I contributed to something, like the IKEA effect, which is actually a pretty well-known concept in the psychology world. I actually assembled this. I built this, more or less, IKEA piece of furniture. And now I like it more because I contributed to it. I'm proud of it. So there's a certain element there of like, hey, I got to choose my own path. I got to sort of make this my own. And now I feel like it's mine. I feel more excited about it in general. So there are, those are 2, but there are 6 more core drives that we could talk about, and maybe we'll touch on that over time, but it's a little preview for you.
One of those things that you pulled in there too is using that choice, that buy-in. And I've actually had some conversations about where else can this apply? Because the training framework, great. But if you're trying to find where else this can apply, and we think about our roles here in AppSec, is a really great place. I highly recommend a lot of our customers do, is let the developers help you choose the tools. Right? So bring them in for that conversation, right? So rather than saying, hey, this is the SaaS DAS and IaaS tool that we said we're going to use here, make it fit your stuff, right? And you're going to host everything on this platform because we think it's more secure. There's going to be a lot of pushback of people that are like, wait a minute, but you don't know my use case. You didn't get my feedback or input. But if you do things like you get surveys, or you basically go in like, hey, we've slimmed it down to these 5 or 6 tools. Can you help us test? Can you help us decide? Let's get our feedback. Like, how do you get a developer to use a security tool when, like, most developers are like, man, it's just extra work? Have it be the tool that they said they wanted from you. They're going to use the tool. They said, this is the tool I want. This is going to help my job, and we're going to do it better. That's the best way. They're going to use the tool. They have buy-in. They feel heard. They feel part of that decision. Everyone, like, and that's what I think it goes back to just not even like a motivation. It's just people want to be heard. They want to be recognized, and they want to have their input, like, it matters. Show that they matter in the situation.
That's 100% right. I think I get asked this a lot too. Like, you talk about relationships, the importance of building relationships when it comes to AppSec. How do you do that? How do you actually build a good relationship with somebody? It's a simple answer. Listen. Like, actually listen. Not just, okay, cool, I'll let you talk for a little bit and wait for my turn. No, more like, I'm genuinely interested in what you have to say when it comes to, like you said, choosing a security tool, or what are your concerns when it comes to security? Or when you think about, the security team rolling out an AppSec program, what concerns you about that? And really listening to that and then tailoring your approach to it, because that's the ownership piece. Like, they were now allowed to share their own thoughts, creativity, and now they feel bought in. They feel that ownership that, like, okay, this person is listening, and they're actually tailoring the approach based on my feedback. I now feel a strong sense of ownership over this AppSec initiative that they're rolling out. That's huge. That makes all the difference when it comes to doing this, because the opposite is it doesn't work, right? This is the ivory tower thing I was talking about at the beginning of the episode. The security team rolls in, they know best. They're just going to say how it's going to be. And guess what? People don't like that. Okay. And this, it also goes back to something that like the reason that I joined cybersecurity. So I was a software engineer, like I mentioned. I was not happy with the approach of security teams over the years. I think you find, people get excited about a certain industry and they want to join an industry because they love what they're doing. That's so exciting. I want to be part of that. Not for me. I wanted to be part of cybersecurity because I did not like what they were doing. And I felt like I could bring a certain perspective into changing it for the better because I cared about security. I just didn't like the approach that folks were taking. But that was a big theme that came out of that, is like, we need to listen. We need to listen to developers who have preferences, who know things that we don't or can't know based on our own focus. And I think that's huge.
One of the things that, like, I love when I hear the same thing from a lot of the people that I think are leaders in kind of this space and thought process, right? And I'm going to do a call out here to Tanya Jenka, great interview I had with her, and you were both well acquainted with. One of my favorite stories she tells is when someone came in her office to talk about something, and she stopped what she did. She turned her chair, she looked at the person, listened, and that person was blown away. They're like, wow, you stopped to actually like hear what I had to say. And that in itself is a reward system. It's a recognition, right? It is, you are important enough for me today to stop what I'm doing, make eye contact, and actively listen and engage in this conversation. That a simple act like that right there makes someone feel heard. They feel a little more important that day, right? Because you took time and put the actual effort into engaging in that conversation. So a great part of that. One thing I did want to bring up, and this is going to lead into the kind of second part that I was thinking of, was relatedness. So, and what I mean by relatedness, and this, I'm going to caveat real quick. In the training space, when we talk relatedness, a lot of time is making sure the right person gets the right content at the right time, right? Those three kind of trifectas, right? The right time before an incident, and the right training to the right role based on what you do in your organization. But that's not what I'm talking about here. When go back to Desi's book about self-determination theory, what they call relatedness is actually what we call community. And what they're basically saying is, I feel like I have a relationship with the situation and the people that are also in it with me. I feel like I belong. And that's why we're on the podcast, the Champion Podcast, right? Security Champion Podcast, because that's what that's about. It's about bringing community to make you feel like you belong. Because if you just ask people to do security stuff, they'll a lot of time they'll do it, right? They'll try, or as long as you don't make it difficult, they'll integrate it into their processes. But they won't necessarily be passionate about it. And I'm not saying you can get everybody to be passionate about it, right? That's not the goal. The goal isn't to make everyone a champion. That'd be great. I'd love a world where every single developer was a champion, but that's not the world we live in, right? Some people they're like, look, just tell me what I need to do and I'll do it, right? They just don't want to be part of that thing. And that's okay. You don't need the same level from everyone, right? Let people meet you where they're at. But with that, though, is you still need to have that availability of community to be able to allow the people that are passionate and that are driven by wanting to feel like they belong as part of that community, a way to join, a way to be recognized, a way to feel like they're not the only ones. One of the biggest anti-patterns for champion programs I see is like, I get this from customers all the time. Yeah, we have a champion program. We got one assigned to every team. Okay. What else? Well, that's it. Yeah, they work with us occasionally. We tell them, we let them try out tools and stuff every now and then. That's the end of the conversation. I'm like, do you have a Slack where they can talk to each other? Do they meet together and share their stories? Do you involve them as a group to help you make decisions? Like, it's not just enough to have one rep out there for everybody. You have to have a true community around it. You have to have the knowledge sharing. You have to feel like once again, because otherwise I'm off on an island just doing extra work, and nobody wants that. I don't want to just be stuck by myself doing extra work. At least, even if there is just extra work, it'd be nice for me to talk to somebody else, even if I'm complaining about the extra work I'm doing, right? Now, I'm not saying you should build a program where people are complaining, but that's at least a bare minimum. Give me somebody to complain to.
100%. I mean, I like to think of security champion programs as communities just from the very beginning. Like, start to talk about your program as a community, because it is about getting people who, hey, care about security maybe a little more for now than others around them together, so that they can talk to each other about the entire thing as well and relate to each other. Going back to my favorite framework, Octalysis, one of the core drives is social influence and relatedness, directly because of this, because there's a core drive, there's a motivation in all of us to connect with others. We're social creatures. You hear that a lot, right? 100% true. Like, the desire to connect with folks is innate. And to tap into that and build a community, I think, is extremely important for your champion program.
It's interesting. So I'm a little tidbit, side note. I'm in a psychology class right now. The reason behind is actually I want to take a psychology class with my kid. So it's one bit, and it's also a side passion of mine. So one of the things we've actually been talking about, and it's funny, is most people when they get in a psychology class, I think what they think they're going to learn is abnormal psychology the whole time, right? What's wrong with people? No, we finally hit that chapter. Then we're in the last couple weeks of class, right? 99% of this was like, well, how do we think? What motivates us? How do we work, right? Like, it's very little bit about the abnormal, but I'm going to bring in the abnormal here because I think it's an interesting part. Introvert versus extrovert. One of the things I actually think, because I think people will talk about this in the way of like, well, and I've heard these type of things. Well, devs are mostly introverts. They're techie people. They don't want to talk. They don't want to be part of a community, and it's a fallacy. It's a fallacy we've created about the definition of what that being an introvert extrovert means, right? And part of that is the idea of, first of all, there is no technical introvert. It's just a scale of extroversion, right? We colloquially use introversion to talk to someone that has low extroversion, but that's not actually a real term in psychology. But people that might be more drained by social interactions, right? That might not be energized by social interaction. You can't discount them to say that they don't want community. That's not what it means at all. Just because my interaction might drain me more than you, and you may be more energized due to an interaction with a person, doesn't mean that I don't want people in my life. It doesn't mean that I don't want to be part of that community. So even even though they have this stigma and idea that tech people are almost always introverts. Well, first of all, it's not. From what I've seen, that's not overly true, right? I think that's just I don't believe that to start with. But secondly, even if it was, it has nothing to do with this conversation. Everyone wants to feel like they belong. I don't care how introverted or extroverted you feel. And that also goes back to, though, you need to make champion programs accessible so people can meet you where they are at, right? So maybe the person with a little more anxiety or a little more introversion shouldn't be the one that doesn't want to be the one giving the public talk at a lunch and learn, but they have other ways they can contribute and participate, right? You have to meet them where they're at and make it accessible for all different types of people for it to be a successful program.
You got it 100%. I know very social people who enjoy social interactions, who are probably more introverted because it drains them. Like, they enjoy it. Again, they like it and they're good at it. It's just kind of where you draw your energy to a large extent, what sort of puts you on that spectrum of introversion versus extroversion. And I also think it applies differently in different situations too. Like, you could be a part, maybe one-on-one conversations, right, are very motivating for you, but large crowds, et cetera, are draining. So you have to kind of take that into account. I don't think you can just categorize someone and just say, you are an introvert and that applies to everything in your life. It just doesn't work that way. Now, in my research and based on a lot of interactions I've had with developers and in designing security champion programs, and then from my own experience, I find that the core drive of social influence and relatedness is actually very high in developers, meaning that they really do care about, in general, I'm generalizing, but they really do care about the social interaction pieces. And my own experience with this is it's a little bit of a club when it comes to developers. You have to navigate the social concerns as well. It's like, cool, I write cool code, but I have to sort of prove that more or less to my peers, other developers and so forth, to sort of break the social barriers that are there, showing that developers are actually very socially driven in my experience. And not only that, kind of the flip side of that is when a developer is doing a good job, they want to hear about that from other developers, from their peers. Okay, if they did not care about social interactions or other people at all, they wouldn't care about that. They'd write good code and they would be happy, sort of intrinsically, right? However, I think it's extremely important to developers to get that recognition, from their manager or their peer who code reviews their code and says, this is awesome. Like, to me as a dev, that was one of the best feelings, is when I made my mentors or folks who are more experienced than me impressed or happy with my work, which again shows that developers are pretty social creatures, just like all of us.
It's interesting when I think about the dynamic of how development work leans to requiring some sort of social interaction with your peers that maybe isn't necessarily there in a lot of other ways. And what I mean by that is, I think you open the can right there with peer reviews, right? That's like, hey, if you're not doing peer reviews on code, you need to start there, right? Like, before we even start talking about champions or any of these other things, start with your peer reviews, right? If you're not doing that already. But I think most organizations understand that no developer should just be off working on a silo writing code that nobody is looking at, right? It's part of it. It's built into all the tools we use to host code, a peer review process. But with that's we are constantly digging into each other's work, detailed technical work, and giving feedback back and forth. And it's built in a way already that you have to have a kind of community around it, right? And it's interesting because I remember I worked on my dev team. We had different people were just known for being good at different things and always doing something a certain way. Like this person always they literally they'd say his code's always structured like so well, so easy to follow, right? And other people weren't that way. They're a little bit more not quite the same, but they're like, they do good comments. It's good enough. We're still hitting the bar where I can review it. It makes sense. We're not going to do the rework, right? But like that was part of that culture, and you could see that in the dynamics of the people that work together. Is that they started, even if they weren't necessarily having lunch together, they were building that relationship and that understanding of how they were working together. Because we in this community are built to like, hey, when I write this, I'm not just writing it for me. I know somebody's going to be looking at this. Like, I know somebody's going to look at this and I'm going to get feedback for it. So I have to do it in a way that I know that's going to happen, right? And it's interesting when we think about that, like, because I always try to think about ways like, man, plug into that process. How do we build community around that process? How do we add on to something that's already there to make things better?
That is so awesome. And I think this to me brings back a lot of memories and thoughts about the term maintenance, like code maintenance. And are you writing your code in a way that other people can read? And if you know that other people are going to read it, you're probably going to write it a little bit differently. And hopefully you're of the mindset that you're going to write it in a way that makes it easy for people to understand. Because I have seen a lot of what I would consider bad code that was just overly fancy. Like, hey, I can do this entire thing in one line. Check me out. I'm so smart. And no one can read what the heck you just did. Like, I remember dissecting some of those one-liners. Perl, by the way, is pretty much the culprit here. I remember having to dissect some of those one-liners that someone was so proud of, and I'm just like hating my life trying to figure out what the heck it even does, and concluding that this is not the right approach, right? If this was made easy for me to read, I could make this modification in half the time or less, which is actually better for business and better for the team in general. So yeah, knowing someone's gonna read your code would hopefully encourage you to write readable code.
I did an early episode on this podcast, and the highlighting topic was called elegant code. And I like that word so much because it brings a little more power to it than just clean, right? Clean means one thing, well annotated, great. Elegance brings another dynamic to it, because what the power behind the word elegance comes into is it's like story writing, right? It has a beginning where things happen. It has a middle. It has an end. You can follow the storyline. It's easy to understand what's happening at each step of the story. Like, you're writing a book, and as I read this book, if it's confusing, then there's a problem. I should be able to follow the story. I shouldn't be confused by your story. It should be easy to follow, and anybody should be able to pick up the book and read it, right? If someone else can't pick up the book and read it, then maybe you should be using different words. Maybe you should be putting the story together differently so that someone can read your story, because that's what we become. We're telling stories in code that accomplish a task, right? And I think that when we bring that mentality, like that thought process behind how we're developing architecture, design, all these things, we're storytellers. And we want other people to know our story. We want you to be able to pick up and read my book. I don't want 5 loops with regex statements all along the way that do something at the very end, right? Like, nobody wants to touch that. And first of all, if I see a regex statement, I'm already pulling out a book and trying to remember what the first 3 lines did, right? Like, it's like when we can make things simple, when we can make them elegant, to tell a story, it's so powerful.
So Google search, if you have not run across this, for how to write unmaintainable code, which is it's a satire document built many years ago that is still 100% relevant today, but it's all sarcastic about here's what you should explicitly do to make your code completely unmaintainable. And the whole premise is like, ensure your job for life, right? Because you're writing unmaintainable code that no one else can actually contribute to. So they have to keep you on board, to actually maintain your own code. It's brilliant. I have loved that document for so many years. So read it. Love it. Would love your feedback when you get the chance.
Oh man, that is definitely going on my reading list. That's so amazing. It's how... There's a premise in the back of the day, that was a real problem. I don't think we see that as much anymore, but they'd hire one dev, he'd do all the work, and then you couldn't get rid of him because nobody else knew what was going on into there, right? Because there was no standardization, there was no review, there's no peers. It was just like, I remember hearing horror stories about that stuff all over the time. Like, we just got to start over.
Yeah, I remember one of the examples, and this whole document is full of all these examples. It is so hilarious, but use one of the advices is use single letter variable names so that you cannot have someone search through the code base whatsoever to find variables and how they're used.
Every function starts with the input A, and then like, oh man.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. And then, like naming methods that have nothing to do with, what it actually does. Making sure the comments are not actually accurate anymore, describing what the function does, and so forth. It's just brilliant, the whole doc. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, you'll enjoy it.
I'm gonna throw a left field here, right? Just because I enjoy doing that. One of the interesting parts that I think by the way, as a prep for our listeners, this will be probably one of a couple episodes that me and Dustin are doing, because I think we have so much we want to talk about that there's no way we could fit this in one episode, right? But I'm gonna pull the string of like what's hot in everyone's topic. Let's talk about AI, right? Why not? I feel like I don't get through an episode without bringing up AI somewhere in the mix of all this, right? And one of those interesting parts when I think about AI, and I actually did a workshop recently where we're working through AI kind of threat modeling. It's kind of I'm calling it threat modeling, but it's kind of like that, right? And the idea is we give these organizations these dossiers. I've made up 6 different organizations. One's like a coffee shop, one's a financial, all these other things, right? So you get even one gets the organization. It has your mission, objectives, employees, has a description. And what it does, it has 8 different things the 8 different processes in your company that you can improve, or business lines that you can improve by integrating AI, right? And so then basically I tell you what the process is, and based on what your business does, you have to pick your 3 that you think will be the most impactful for your business. You pick those. I come out with my document. I'm like, all right, let's see what reward you did. All these are positive so far, right? So if you picked X, Y, and Z based on each business, you got an increase in revenue, right? So you've made money. You're like, great, you included a chatbot with your coffee shop. So now customer, like, you can reduce the amount of employee leverage, and you're able to like improve customer relations. You're selling this much more, whatever, right? Kind of arbitrary. Then we go to phase 2. We're like, okay, now you've chosen AI. Let's talk about what could go wrong. Let's talk about the risk we might have introduced. So then I have this long list. And I also tell you, once you picked where you're going to integrate AI, I'll give you a little more detail. Like, all right, this is where you integrated. This is exactly what you decided to do, and here's the revenue you got. Now, here's this list of 20 different threats that could affect your organization, right? I want you to pick one threat you think is the most prevalent for the decision you made. So then you have to go in and you're basically threat modeling. Well, I picked a chat bot. Maybe prompt injecting is something that could happen here that could cause something to happen, right? Or maybe if you automated AI to help you do your inventory. Well, one threat might be is the AI might have a hallucination and order the wrong amount of product, right? We don't have human oversight in this. We automated it, right? So what is our threat? So then you pick all those that are the most appropriate threat. And then you have this long list of mitigations. We're like, okay, these are all the different ways you can mitigate. Pick the mitigation you best think addresses your threat. And they go through and like, oh, human oversight, right? That makes sense for if we're going to be making automated purchase, stuff like that. And at the end, it's kind of unfair, because then I pick a random attack for each one of those business lines, and maybe you picked the right threat, maybe you didn't, maybe you put the right control, maybe you didn't, and it affects your revenue. If you get hit, you lose money, right? Like, it's fun. It's a game, right? We go into there, but you can see real impact. Here's the part that I want to drive into that, though. The whole reason I told this whole story is actually has nothing to do with AI. I don't care about the AI part of this. What it comes back to is talking about what we do here in this community right now. We bring people to come in and we interview them as podcast guests and hosts. And we have them share their information. And basically what we do is I trick the listener into coming in and learning a bunch of stuff where I don't actually have to provide them a lot of information most of the time. Most of the time I just get other people to tell you how to do it. In this situation, one of the biggest things we did at the end, I went around to each table. I asked them, well, how'd it go? What'd you learn? And they're like, well, to be clear, the first 20 minutes I did a primer. I talked about AI. I talked about different threats and what they mean. I talked about mitigation strategies. Like, I gave them the information kind of up front. It was the least important part of the conversation. So what happened there, this was at North Carolina State University. A lot of business people, a lot of students, a lot of everybody else, is as they sat down, they were in their groups and they were working on this. They taught each other 10 times more than I ever could have taught any individual group. They sat down and they said, hey, here's what our business does. Here's the different threats that could come into it. And then they're like, well, this is how this works. And one person would be like, oh, well, what about this? And they as that community, it took me 2 hours. It was like 3 hours, I think, but don't include my primer, right? So in a couple hours, this group of people that we brought in from different business units, different backgrounds, and just had them talk through the different risks that could infect their organization. They taught each other so much more. Because guess what? I'm going to tell you right now, I am not an AI specialist, right? That's not what I needed. And by the way, guess what? To do this, I didn't need to be an AI specialist. I just had to have enough of the bare information to give people the platform to be able to start having that conversation with each other and teaching each other. So it was a powerful experience. But the biggest takeaway is, as your leaders of these champion programs, you do not need to be the subject matter expert. You need to create the community and the platform to allow people to get together and share that information. Allow them to be the ones educating each other. That's the power of this community. That's the power of bringing people together by giving them the platform to be able to do that.
I have run several threat modeling sessions, probably no surprise. And I have found that is the greatest benefit, is to just get the other people to talk about their system that they've built together. That it's just surprising to me that in a lot of cases, they are not synced up on even what the system does, or that, certain services are responsible for certain things that one person knows that's true, another person didn't know that or even disagrees. And I have always said that is the greatest value of threat modeling sessions. get these folks in the same room and actually talk, expose some of these gaps in knowledge across the group. So I love the example that you just shared. And I think I'm glad that you went beyond AI in that to prove the point that people really just need to communicate more when it comes down to it. My other experience with this is as an AppSec team, AppSec architects are helping folks across multiple teams, and they have a unique perspective because they see things across multiple teams that even these individual teams aren't aware of. They're not aware that, hey, Team A is actually building a system that's very similar to what Team B is building because they haven't been talking. But that architect sees that, and that's an opportunity. And I've always encouraged my AppSec team members to do this, is help people connect those dots. You know, say, like, tell both Team A and Team B, hey, you guys are building something similar. What is it? You know, what would it take to collaborate on something like this? So they have that unique sort of visibility across multiple teams that I think is important as well.
Yeah, and so that's the other thing too, is there's a lot of organizations that I see like approach threat modeling as like almost a check the block. And what I mean by that is like, well, can we get a tool to scan it and just give me output and build it for me? I'm like, theoretically, yeah, absolutely, right? But what'd you gain from that? Well, what was accomplished? Well, identify some threats we can mitigate. That's great. I think there's some scanning tools that do the same thing. Why did you need a model to do that, right? Like, if you can scan and find the threats in the architecture, just have it print out a list of threats and tell you what you should do, right? That's not threat modeling. What's the value of that, right? The threat modeling value is getting people involved. And by the way, and here's one of the best things I talk about is like, how do we prove people are doing security better? And I say threat modeling, and they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't care what's in the threat models. I don't care. I don't care if the diagram looks anything like, they're like, oh, it's not perfectly accurate. Who cares? What I want to see is, have you been doing threat modeling? Because all that tells me, if you can give me the binary decision, what teams in your organization are actually doing threat models. And it may be like small feature ones. It doesn't have to be this big event. Just you and one other person, or you build one maybe and you have someone else review it and give you feedback, because now you're communicating, right? And you're doing it in a way that's smaller, more micro, and more maintainable, that you can do more often. And if I have artifact that I can, here's my big takeaway. If it lives near the code, if it lives near the ticket, if it lives somewhere that we can account that it's been done, and we can metrics it, and we can watch it over time, what this all ties back to is now I can track behavior change. Because that's a hard thing to really track. How do we track behavior change? One of the easiest ones is, are our teams thinking about security? Well, easy. Are they doing small threat models and working? Can we collect those, and can we see how often it's getting done? And are we increasing that over time? Have we built enough awareness about this and taught them and enabled them with tools that make it easy enough that they're still participating? If you have tools automating this all for you, right? Great. You've gained nothing, because what you've all gained is another scanning tool that hasn't changed behavior. Behavior is how you change security, right? Tools don't fix it. Tools are safety nets that can catch when we do it wrong, right? And maybe they can enable us to do it better. But if you want to track behavior, one of the best ways to do that is let's watch for behaviors we want to show that I truly care about security. If you're building threat models, you're proving to me that you took a moment to at least pause and say, hey, what was the security impact? If I can get everyone in my organization to just do that on the occasion, to stop and be like, hey, what's the security impact? I've changed culture. I've had that effect that I'm looking to have.
100%. Yeah. And I think so much of what we do needs to be said in the context of change, behavior change, because that's what we're in the business of, frankly. If we show up as AppSec professionals and we find no vulnerabilities and everyone's doing secure coding and everything's great, then done. Okay, there's nothing to do here. That would not happen. And there's a reason they hired you, probably. But the point is, if there are vulnerabilities and people are not following secure behaviors and so forth, you need to change that. So all of the change management, all the change concepts come into play. I want to speak to a few things that you mentioned. And it sort of ties back to what we were talking about before about showing wins right away as an AppSec team. I think one of the biggest wins you can show is if you're the new, friendly, valuable security team, you can actually measure that. And one of my favorite metrics to use to demonstrate that is, are people bringing you in to conversations? Okay. And you can see that with maybe even Jira tickets. So I've run queries that are, okay, before the friendly security team, after the friendly security team, how often are people creating tickets themselves that then they invite the security team into, either through a comment or something, they tag them, right? Or something that sort of brings them in. And the reason I love to show that, and hopefully the rate goes up or there's a nice before and after correlation there. But the reason I like to show that is because A, they obviously know who you are or they wouldn't bring you in. And B, you're actually providing value to them to prompt them to actually bring you into the conversation, which is huge. Okay, because if they didn't know who you were and they didn't trust you and they thought you would get in the way and they're annoyed at you, they're not going to bring you into those tickets at all. They're going to avoid you. They're going to go around you, which we've seen so many times. And I love what you were saying too around essentially correlating good security practices with threat modeling, which I think is awesome. And that's exactly right. And it's not even just security practices. I think it's engineering practices. If you have teams that are regularly threat modeling, it shows a level of security of their engineering approach, which I think is huge as well. I've had so many instances where, hey, we want to do threat modeling, and we go ask a team, do you want to get involved? And they're like, sure, we'll give you one resource to help you threat model our systems, right? Here's one developer that has a little bit of spare time that can do it. And I'm like, you're missing the point. The whole idea of threat modeling is to get your team together to talk about things that you may not have otherwise talked about. You can't really say that explicitly, though, because people might get offended at that. But that really is the ultimate goal, is to get people in the same room talking about their systems so they can learn from each other.
Absolutely. All right, Dustin, we're at an hour. I feel like that it's one of those points that we're going to have to, I think, dwindle this down and continue the conversation. It's been a great conversation, but I think we have a few things left we could probably talk about in another episode if we get back on. So we'll have to table the rest of that for the moment. But before I close it down, based on any of the conversations we had today, any last kind of thoughts or anything you want to kind of leave with our audience before we close this one down?
I can think of a lot of things. I mean, first of all, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be part of Security Journey. I'm excited to work with you, Mike. I mean, this conversation, I think, has, as we knew would happen, solidifies that we're of the same mind when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And that very much excites me to be working for Security Journey and working with you. And then in terms of, takeaways, et cetera, one of the things I always leave people to sort of take away is to design a program, an AppSec program or a security champion program, whatever it is, that you're excited about. Okay, take the time to be creative and do something different and bring your own unique personality into it so that you can get excited about it. And the biggest reason for that is because there's actually a business reason for it. Okay, it's because people will be more attracted to your program if you go about it that way. Okay, you're not going to win people over. We talked about AppSec people being salespeople. You're not going to win people over. You're not going to sell this concept of security best practices unless you truly believe in it and you truly believe in your approach. So change your approach until you're very excited and you truly believe in it.
I love that, and that's so important. Believe, and people can tell. People can tell when you're passionate and you believe, and it's impactful. It's part of that whole puzzle. All right, I want to thank you, Dustin, for jumping in here, having a great conversation. I want to thank all our listeners for jumping on, giving us your time, joining us for this adventure today. So we're going to wrap it up. Please join us for the next episode of the Security Champion podcast. And as a closing note, actually, no, that's good. All right, I'll save it to later. Going to add things on, but I'll save it to later. So I always remember, as always, that is security is a journey, not a destination.